Hey guys, it's Brian from Diesel and Iron.
And Ray.
And we are back to review another piece of equipment. Unfortunately, I'm just gonna pre-apologize. We're about 2.5 months overdue on this thing. We've been fighting inclement weather, we've been fighting jobs that have fallen through, but finally, we are here with the review of the FAE head. Rick, what do we got going on?
Today we are going to talk about this forestry mulcher from FAE. It's a UML SSL 150. It's equipped with a sonic system.
Sonic system. We were gonna get into the sonic system here in just a minute. It is awesome. I could not stress that enough. But first, general overview, what are we working with, Rick?
So we're going to dive into this thing today. We have run this thing right through the paces of underbrush. We've put it through 5-6 acre land clears. We've pushed trees over. We've hit bumper jacks, tires on rims.
Sandy conditions, clay conditions.
Muddy conditions, rain. We've had this thing stuck with the machine. With all that being said,
let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
All right, guys, we're gonna start at the top of the head and kind of work our way down. So first of all, this push bar. When we first received this unit, I didn't know if I was gonna be a fan of the, teeth, if you will, the bars that actually stub out here that are used to manipulate trees as they go down. On the Fecon head that we were used to, they were kind of more angled like teeth. They had sharp points so that you could actually stab into a tree and kind of guide it. And so I didn't know if I was really gonna like these. It turns out I actually way prefer these just because they are, as you can see, these things are stout, they don't move, and you can really put some pressure on a tree to guide it where you need it to. These actually go all the way through the push bar, and they are welded on the back end as well, in addition to your support brackets up front. So you can really crank on this thing and you don't have to worry about it cracking, you don't have to worry about anything twisting. I cannot tell you enough how robust this push bar is. So it's been really, really nice. You also have the center support here, and that does a great job. As you can see, we've got the door in the fully open position. It does a great job of protecting that door. If you're going into a tree, you want to get really aggressive on the grind. That keeps the door to where you're not actually going to bend it or flex it. All of this center bar and the center support is going to take that abuse. So moving down here to the actual head, you can see we've got real heavy shoes on the heavy duty shoes on the bottom of this unit, and you actually the difference between this unit and the Fecon unit we were used to, the Fecon unit would actually in this position keep that drum up off of the ground. And in some ways that was beneficial, but for the most part it became an irritation because you couldn't ever really get the material that was left on the ground. Versus this unit, the drum is actually in contact with the ground. So if we were to fire up the head right now, it would actually start to grab some of the dirt and grass. But at the same time, you've got these shoes that come up over the nose right in here. And so if we want to lift that drum up off the ground, all we have to do is kind of angle your bucket down and it changes the pitch and that drum comes up off the ground. So you do have good height control. But like I said, if you want to really get down to ground level, this head has the ability to do that, whereas the old Fecon did not. Since we're in this position anyway, just kind of overall general construction of the head, you've got great access to your side doors here, but as Rick has mentioned to me and pointed out multiple times, on the Fecon head, these bolts were actually external to the head. And so they're coming into contact with trees and with debris, and they're just slowly getting rounded off. Versus on this head, they are actually countersunk into the head so that they're protected. You're not gonna have any issues getting those side panels off if you ever need to service one side or the other. All right, the next thing we're gonna talk about is the door on this unit. So we did not have a door on our Fecon unit. I know that is an option, but this is the first unit that I've ever operated with a door on it. And I am super impressed, especially with the performance of this head with the door. And it really impacts it in two ways. The first and the most obvious way that it impacts the production is you're not throwing material across the job. So if you're mulching up against a building or a house or right next to some cars, somewhere where you've got to be a little more dainty, a little more delicate, you can close this door all the way down and you are shooting material out onto the ground. And so while I would never recommend it, you could probably stand about 20 feet in front of this head and be pretty dang safe because you don't have material flinging straight at you. Now that being said, you can open the door fully. It does fold back, and we're going to show that here in a second. It will fold all the way back and allow you to really process the material, and it is going to throw material across the job like a traditional mulch head. The second way this door really has an impact on production is with the output of material. So when you close this door down, it actually puts it into almost a regrind mode because you're not flinging that material out in big chunks. More of that material is going to circulate up into the head, and the product that you get out of this head with the door closed is nothing short of amazing. Rick actually called me the first time he took it out on a job and sent me some pictures and said, you won't even believe the quality. And I had the exact same result. When I took it out on the job sites, when we closed that door down, the material is so fine when you close that door down. You almost don't have to go back and grade it out. You do if you're gonna do an absolute finish grade, but it's pretty stinking close to not needing you to have to do anything with it. It's just that fine. So the door has been a tremendous feature on this machine. It does fold back far enough behind the push bar here that you don't have any interference. So if you're going up against a big tree that you need to kind of crank on a little bit, the door's not gonna get damaged. So really great feature.
All right, as we dive into this, we have the door fully open now. This is all the way open, far as it could go back, as Brian showed you before. This door is electronic over hydraulic is the way we have it set up right now for our Case TV 450. This also has the capability to go just fully hydraulic, where that runs like on a Takeuchi machine with that second auxiliary pump that could control the door open and close. So we're able to take this door, as we were talking about a minute ago, we're able to put this down to like a full regrind position, or we could run it halfway up, being able to control that debris, how far it's going to go, to also help this head to be able to run and fully tilt with the sonic motor. As we're going to talk about some of this stuff in here, we got Carbide Teeth right here that we are running. These are also capable of running like some chipper knives, chipper teeth to get into some sandy more material. We're up here in Michigan, so we're running these with the clay, the mud, the rocks, everything that we've done. We've actually dinged quite a bit of these up. I really like the feature with this, with the door open. I could change probably 5-6 teeth at a time here with this nut bolt system. I was used to the Allen bolt head and it was such a pain to get into. But this really gets in here. I could change these teeth out probably within 25-30 seconds a tooth. I could have the nut off and swap another one back in. You clean it up. As we get in here though, talk about some of this regrind when this door is fully shut. So obviously right now you could shred quite a bit of material, but as you roll this door back down, we could really get into a lot of this regrind. You got a lot more of these fins that are hanging down here all the way. There's 2 sets all the way across from left to right here. With this door down, this is what's really starting to produce nice product, nice material. It's picking it back up. It's not letting it go completely out. It's actually picking back up and just regrinding, recircling right here. All right, guys, we're jumping over to the left side here. We got the door open. What I really like about the Sonic system here is their programming features. Once everything's plugged in to your machine, you come over here and you hit this button. Once the light turns green or blue, you jump in the cab. You run the throttle all the way up. Once that's up, you hit the on button, your auxiliary, you let this head just spool up. This thing will calibrate itself to your machine, and it's typically like right around the 2-minute mark. You run just full tilt and it will calibrate itself. It's phenomenal. And what that's doing is it's actually matching the gallons per minute with the head, so this thing runs at optimal performance. The other feature that I really like about this head is we didn't have a drum brake before. This thing actually has a drum brake. So before, we actually used to stop the head. We'd either find a tree or sit there for 3-4 minutes and just let this head just spool down forever. We would drag it in the ground. This thing actually will spool down with the drum brake on in 10 to 15 seconds. It's unreal.
All right, so now that Rick has covered the actual calibration of the Sonic system, let's talk about what the Sonic system does. So if you go back to the older technology, you would have just a regular hydraulic motor. And so as you go into the material, the hydraulic motor starts to slow, you get behind on your torque curve, and now you have to pull out of that material and let the head recover. And I know on the Fecon head that we used to use, this recovery time, you're talking probably a good 10 seconds before you can get back into the material. The next generation of that, you almost have a 2-stage transmission, if you will. So what'll happen is your RPMs will drop on the rotor until it gets to a certain point, and then the motor will actually almost step down a gear and kind of help recover some of that power in the lower RPM. But you still end up, backing off of the material so that you can get back up to speed. With the Sonic system, the way it was described to me is that motor acts almost like a rheostat. It is constantly adjusting on the fly to give you the maximum performance for whatever the rotor speed is. And Rick and I didn't really know what to take out of that when it was being described to us. It didn't really start to click for us until we got this into material. And this is where I'm really going to praise this head. This head absolutely eats material. It is unbelievable the production we can get out of this. I'm not exaggerating when I say easily 50% more productive than the Fecon head we used to use. That is where this head really separates itself from the pack, and it is immediately noticeable. When we pulled this off of the trailer and hooked it up within the first 5 minutes of being in this machine with this head on it, both Rick and I had to stop the machine and talk about just how impressive the performance was. Easily 50% more production with this sonic system compared to a traditional hydraulic motor. Now, I do want to move up top here now that we've finished talking about the sonic system and talk about the hose system. This is another, it's a really great point for the head, but at the same time, we've got a couple little tweaks with it. The first reason why we love it so much, with the Fecon head and some other heads on the market, these hoses actually snake down through the head and then over to the motor. So we all know these hoses are going to get either snagged on something or they're just going to wear out, and ultimately you're going to have to replace a hose. With the older style heads, that means you have to snake that all the way through the head to get it hooked up to the motor. Now you're up underneath trying to get it hooked up to the motor with your wrenches and everything. Yet with this unit, if you snag one of these lines and rip it, it is a very quick fitting right here. You're only replacing this section of hose and you're back up and running that much quicker, which is really convenient. Now, that kind of flips us over into some of the nitpicky things we have about this head. And I do want to stress, we had to nitpick this head. We have really been impressed with it. One of our nitpicky things is the angle at which these hoses come off from the factory. We're probably going to be able to adjust these. We haven't really had the time this season to experiment, but because of the fact that they come off directed right at the door, and this is just part of running a case machine. I know there are a couple other manufacturers. Cat is one where the door swings outward. What happens is you run into a conflict with the door there up against the hose, and so you can't open the door all the way, and that's kind of frustrating. If these were angled off to the left a little bit, that would do two things for you. One, it would give you more door clearance, but the other thing it would allow you to do is tilt the head down just a hair more. As I stated earlier in the review, in order to get that drum off the ground, you can tilt the head away from you and use the front of those shoes to kind of get it up off the ground. But when you do that, because of the angle of these hoses, this whole thing starts to pull pretty tight. And so if these hoses were angled off to one side of the head, it would give you that much more of a spring action to where these weren't being pulled quite so tight. And really my concern, you've got your couplers here, but really it's right in here. As you can see, this turn starts to get pretty tight as soon as you start to tilt away from the machine. Again, I don't see why that can't be adjusted with just a little time and some wrenches. But that's one of our little nitpicky things that we've kind of noticed on this head. The second thing is this spring right here. I'm just going to be honest, it's pretty useless in its current configuration. We could take that spring off of there and I don't think those lines would go anywhere. We could probably, again, if you were to turn the hoses and reconfigure just a little bit, we'd probably get that situated a little bit better, but that's really, it's not as helpful as you would think it would be. It looks like it's doing much more than it actually is. And finally, when it comes to the hoses, our last little irk that we had is this wrap actually will sit all the way up here if you've got it fully wrapped like it is from the factory, which means that you have very little room to manipulate these hoses up here. Now, I totally get why FAE has done that, because you don't want those hoses catching on brush and everything, but we did notice that it did make the initial coupling pretty difficult. So as you can see, we've kind of redone the wrap just a little bit so that really the only part that's exposed are your two main hoses. We've got everything else still in the wrap. That's worked just fine for us. Again, just to reiterate, super nitpicky.
All right, jumping back up top here, guys. This head is actually able to get adjusted. It's got 4 bolts in here, so you could really drop that bolt down and fold that material right over, really feeding that head in pretty quick. The best feature about this whole thing is the footstep. Right here, you ain't got to jump on the tracks no more, slipping off, falling when it's wet. The grip tape that's on it, they listen to the people that actually operate this stuff. You could jump on it here. It's all grip. It's all tape. We get right into the machine.
Okay, so one final thing that this is something that I could see being a concern. We haven't had the head long enough to really put this through the test, but as you can see, you've got these connectors totally exposed to the elements. They are, going to be right here on the front of the machine where they can potentially get snagged on brush. which I'm going to assume this is why they've got these quick connects anyway, but I could foresee this possibly being a problem down the road, running through the woods. Again, plastic over time in the sun is going to get where it's brittle, so I could see these couplers trying to snap off. I don't know how much of a problem that's going to be, but it is one of the things that stuck out to me that might be a little concerning down the road. Well, Rick, what are your overall thoughts on the machine?
You know, overall, besides a little bit into the nitpicking that we talked about, just being an operator, that stuff could be fixed. Overall, though, this thing has just really blown me away. It's got to be about 50% more efficient than the other head that we used to have. The system that they got running this thing with the sonic system there is just unreal. The constant hydraulic shifting gears constantly is the best way I could describe it. This thing just eats brush. We flopped trees down right with the chainsaw, took out 3/4 of the trees with this thing, and this thing is just designed to eat. I mean, they were right when they said they're some of the leading industry standards is what they set this thing at. I'd have to say it's right there with it. I am just totally blown away with this machine.
So I'm in total agreement. You know, it's one of those things where you initially step into a new attachment like this and you go, okay, I've already operated one, how much more impressive can it be? And so I was expecting a little bit of a performance increase, but not to the extent that we got out of this head. Easily 50% more productive. Now, one thing we haven't covered up until this point is just how quiet this head is. So on top of the fact that you've got 50% more production when you compare apples to the Fecon head, this thing is really quiet. For the first couple days we had this head, both Rick and I would pull away from the material because we thought the head had actually spun down. And it wasn't until you pulled far enough back that you realized, oh, it's still running. And not only is it running, but it's running at full tilt. We hadn't even lost any RPM on the drum because it's just that quiet. And then we got it on a job where we really put it to work. So Rick, what was it like once we actually started chewing?
But that's really when I noticed what this machine was actually capable of. To the point where our other head used to stall out and we'd actually just start backing off with that head right there to actually let the machine just start recovering.
And it was at least a what, 10-second recovery
10
time?
10 to 15 seconds.
It was a long time to get full RPM
That's
back.
when we started noticing 5-6 minutes into this aggressive grind, that sonic motor really kicking in. Once that started kicking in, the productivity of this thing, as the other attachment we would pull off, this thing would just keep eating. And it got to the point now, once you started just hearing the hydraulics kick in, or you'd see that gauge just start going, you just slow it down just a hair, and the recovery thing has to be, the speed has to be right around 3 seconds.
That's what I was just about to say. I would put it right around 3 seconds for full recovery. And like Rick said, the amazing thing is once you get used to running the sonic system, you don't pull off of the material like you would with the older style heads. You just slow down. That's been the most incredible thing to me, is just how much power this motor has, because you don't even have to back off of the material. You just slow down and the motor has enough power that it will drive through the material, it will pull itself back up to full RPM, and then you can go back to being full on aggressive.
That's a phenomenal point right there when you're talking about just slowing down. The other head, we were trying to just stay with the productivity rate of we'd just mulch so much, we'd back up to let that thing catch back up, then we'd run back up there to get back into action. This thing, we had actually just slowed down our process of just grinding.
While continuing to mulch.
While continuing to mulch, yes. And this thing was 50% more productive.
Yeah, it's been unreal. So in closing, Rick, overall thoughts?
I love it. This thing is just an absolute beast, and you know, it does what it says it's gonna do.
Absolutely, I'm in total agreement. This thing is an absolute monster. We don't plan on giving it back. I will just put it that way. We don't plan on giving this head back. Thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you guys on our next equipment review here on
Diesel and Iron.